God, we thank you that our brokenness is not the final word. We thank you that you have come even to the places of our deepest shame and anguish to remind us that you created us and that you walk with us. Amen. On that day, Jacob found himself at a crossroads. Behind him were the last 20 years of his life, the land where he had been exiled after tricking his older twin brother Esau out of his inheritance and blessing. This was the land that Jacob went to at that time, and the land where he'd met and married his wives, two sisters, Leah and Rachel. It's the place where his 11 children had been born, the land where he had amassed significant wealth. This was the land of his life. But it no longer held space for him. It was time for Jacob to move on. And so as he approached the Jabbok River, the land that lay ahead of him was his homeland, the place where he was born. Now it was ruled over by the brother whom Jacob had cheated. The last time they had spoken, 20 years ago, Esau had threatened to kill Jacob. And now he was coming home to the land of his father, the land of his birth. Behind him was who he was. Ahead of him was who he was to become. And he did not know what lay in store for him across the river. Not having spoken to his brother in 20 years, would Esau make good on the promise that he had made to Jacob to take his life? What lay in store for him? Was it a return to home, a welcome, danger, or death? Would he go back to being the same old Jacob he had always been as a child? And so Jacob sent his family across the river and sent out ahead of him a gift of livestock and of treasure in the hopes of earning the favor of his brother Esau. And quite alone, he approached the bank of the river. He was stuck between the man he had always known himself to be, the man who was a trickster, the man who lived his life trying to get more and more and more of what he desired. He was stuck between that man and the man he knew he could aspire to become, the man who built bridges across division, the man who provided for his whole family, the man who apologized to his brother. Between his own shame and the pain of being removed for so many years from his family, Jacob was stuck. I wonder who among us has not known this moment? Who among us has not wrestled and struggled with who we are and who God knows we can be? I thank God that we are all different people than we were when we were teenagers. Nobody else feels that way. When I look back on my own teenage years, I remember myself as really selfish. I remember myself as being awkward and odd. I remember myself saying things that felt strange to me, that felt maybe a little bit wrong to me, so that I could be included in a group of friends. I remember myself focusing on all of the things that I encourage my own teenager not to focus on when I was a teenager, right? I remember focusing on drama between my friends and I. I remember exploring for the first time new technologies that were definitely not available in my parents' age, right? We had instant messenger, and I remember staying up all night on my family's desktop computer talking on instant messenger. And thank goodness I'm a different person now than I was then. A few years ago, I had Christmas off. I wasn't a part of a church that required me to lead a service on Christmas. And it was the only way for me to go back to North Carolina where I had grown up. Because every year, some high school classmates of mine have a reunion in Davidson, North Carolina at the soda shop, which is like an old school like soda fountain kind of diner, right? So my classmates gather here every year on Christmas Eve, and I'm never able to go because there's never a way for me to get back from North Carolina to wherever it is that I'm living to preside over Christmas Eve services, right? And I was excited to go because I hadn't seen a lot of these people since I had graduated high school, but I was also really nervous because in my mind, everybody else in that room cast me in the same light that I saw myself as a teenager. Focused on the wrong things, ashamed and awkward of who I am, right? Mean to people so that I can be connected with a group of friends. I just knew that everybody in that room remembered me just that way. Jacob had that same narrative. As he approached the river, I imagine him saying some of the same things that came into my head when I was getting ready to meet my friends again. I imagine that Jacob said to himself, I know exactly what Esau's going to say about me. In his mouth will be every nasty thing I ever said about myself. Maybe I shouldn't even cross this river. In fact, I'll just live out here on the edge of nowhere. I already sent my wife and children ahead. I'm sure that my father will protect them, will take care of them. If I just stay here, I'll never have to face what I know Esau thinks about me, because I think all of those things about myself. So there Jacob stood that night on the edge of the Jabbok River, and God came to meet him there. God knew that Jacob was already struggling. God didn't come to pick a fight with Jacob because he was wrong. In fact, Jacob had been a trickster all his life. All of those things that Jacob believed about himself, God already knew the reality of Jacob. God already knew that he was striving to get as much as he could wherever he could. And God was with him anyway. In fact, there's no evidence in the biblical text that God ever tried to punish Jacob because of who he was. God walked with Jacob, knowing everything that Jacob knew about himself. No, God met Jacob that night because he knew on the edge of the Jabbok River, Jacob was going to struggle with everything in his past. And struggle Jacob did. He fought all night, wrestling this way and that way, tossing on the ground and falling. I imagine they're on the edge of the river, and so how does the fight not fall into the river, right? It's messy, and Jacob is tired and exhausted. He's frightened and he's sad. And finally, the daybreak is approaching, and Jacob says, I'm not going to let go. I'm not going to stop fighting till I get a blessing. Jacob fought so hard, so strong, that the text tells us the man with whom he was wrestling could not prevail against him. Jacob fought against all of those demons, against all of the pictures that he had of himself. And he said, I'm not going to let go until I find out who I am, until I get my blessing. There's an old song that says, I can feel the presence of the Lord, and I'm going to get my blessing right now. I imagine that tenacity is what Jacob had when he struggled all night. And finally, the two broke apart. The man with whom he was fighting, whether it was this idea of himself or whether it was God coming to help him work out and wrestle out what was inside his heart. They stepped away from each other, and God rewarded Jacob with a change of name and a change of identity. God said, you are no longer Jacob, now you are Israel. Now you are the one who struggles with God and lives to tell the tale. The song that we will sing as our middle hymn is called I Will Change My Name. I will change your name, I'm sorry. And it says, I will change your name. You shall no longer be called wounded, outcast, lonely, or afraid. I will change your name, and your new name shall be called confidence, joyfulness, overcoming one, faithfulness, friend of God, one who seeks my face. I walked into my reunion that night just absolutely certain that it was going to be a horror show. I knew I was going to meet with all of my friends who I assumed were much closer to each other than they were with me, and I knew they were going to see me as that same tired, afraid, lonely person I knew I was in high school. And so I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by defending myself. I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, look, I'm really sorry for everything that I was and everything that I did and for everything that I said to you that I'm sure hurt your feelings when we were young, but please, I was a teenager and I'm really sorry. I'm a different person now. There's a lot that's gone on in my life, and I want to present myself to you as a different person. And I came up to my first friend with whom we'd always had sort of an awkward teasing kind of relationship, and I always felt like I had just this biting kind of sarcasm towards him. And I gave this spiel. I said, I'm a totally different person now. I'm really sorry. If you can ever forgive me, I'd really like for us to be friends. And he looked at me and he shook his head and he goes, yeah, we were all teenagers. Wasn't it the worst? And I sort of laughed and I let my guard down. And I started new relationships again with all of these people who I had written off because I felt like I wasn't worth it to them. That morning, Jacob got up, and I imagine he had to clean himself up pretty substantially. And with a new confidence, a new name, a new identity, he walked across the river into the land of his brother. And when he came upon Esau, he bent down low to the ground with a kind of humility that Jacob hadn't had the courage to have before. And he knelt down in front of Esau, and Esau said, "Why are you kneeling down? I found all of these livestock and all of this money in a field." And Jacob said, "All that I have is yours." And Esau looked at him and helped him up, and he said, "Brother, I have all that I need. Come live in peace with me." God is with us on every moment of our path. From who we were as children to who we are becoming in the eyes of God. Jacob demanded a seat at the table. Jacob demanded to be seen as who he was, who he knew that God was bringing him to become. No point on his journey was any less valuable because he was now Israel. No point on his journey was ever judged wrong because he was a different person now. God was with him on every moment of the path. That last line of the opening hymn that we sung this morning is my favorite in all of hymnody. It says, "Changed from glory into glory, until in heaven we take our place, until we cast our crowns before thee, lost in wonder, love, and praise." Changed not from some wretched sinner into some person who is now acceptable in the eyes of God, but changed from glory into glory. Beloved, God delights in you. Wherever you are on your journey of transformation, God delights in you and sits next to you and works with you while you struggle to become who you are. Amen.